Hello and welcome. I have recorded that before and then I noticed that the sound was very bad. So I'm hoping I'm having better sound now. Um, so welcome to Let Me Explain This. Let Me Explain This. The show where we talk about what is going on in the Icelandic labor market and explain a little bit the background to it for people who might have difficulties reading Icelandic news. And today is a little bit of a breaking news episode. We actually wanted to talk about the Life Collective Agreement. However, last week the news broke that the Minister of Justice, Áslaug Sigurbjörnsdóttir, is considering putting a law on the strike of the air mechanics for the search and rescue teams. And I wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the strike of the aircraft mechanics, but also to talk a little bit about the history when a law has been put on strikes, what is the legal reasoning for it. So to talk a little bit about the aircraft mechanics, so the aircraft mechanics of the search and rescue teams are public servants, which means that the government is the other party on the negotiating table. And their main demand has been same work, same pay. Basically, that they get to work under the same conditions as air mechanics working in the public sector. So, for example, air mechanics working for Iceland Air. And their collective agreement has been open since December 2019. So they have been negotiating for almost a year now. So this episode is not scripted because it's really breaking news. I just kind of collected notes. So if I'm a little bit rambly, this is the reason. They have been negotiating since December 2019, and the negotiations have not gone very well. They went to the state arbiter, and then on the 20th of October, they voted to go on strike, and the strike started now on the 5th of November. Now, the aircraft mechanics for search and rescue, they basically repair the search and rescue helicopters, especially for sea search and rescue, which is obviously very important for Icelandic health and safety because we are an island. And the fishing industry is one of the biggest fishing industries, and boats get into trouble. In Icelandic law, it is legal for the government to put a law on a strike if the strike is from a profession that is vital for the health and safety of the nation. And it is worded very vaguely. And in the past few years, this law has been used several times to make laws against strikes, and I put them there. So in 2001, there was a law put on fishermen. The fishermen were on strike. The fishermen actually went to court over this, and they won. And it was basically said that even though they are vital for the economy of Iceland, they do not pose a threat to health and safety if they go on strike, and that this is too much of a restriction of their legal right to strike. In 2004, the teachers went on strike, and they had been on strike for several weeks, and schools had been closed for several weeks, and then the government put a law on it. They gave two reasons for the law. The first was basically that it is harming the children too much if the school is closed for such a long time. And the second reason, which is a more interesting reason, was that if the teachers would get the wage raises that they're negotiating for, and teachers are also public servants, so remember, the government which was putting the law on the teacher strike was also the one the teachers were negotiating with. So if the wages rise according to how the teachers want them to, then other professions will follow suit, which will lead to inflation, which will be bad. Inflation is kind of a it's kind of the in Germany we have that thing that's called Totschlag argument. It's like the argument that kills all other argument. If you say this will lead to inflation, you've won. You've won the argument. But this is also an argument that can be made for any strike. It's not an argument that is specific to teachers as a profession. And the law actually doesn't really. The law says if it's a profession that is vital for the health and safety of the Icelandic people, it does not say if the economic consequences of a strike in general are too grave. So this argument that is not actually an argument specific to teachers is it's very dodgy, and it's kind of pressing the idea of the law a lot. And then it basically escalated from there. In 2010, the aircraft mechanics for commercial aircraft went on strike, and in case any of you remember, in 2008 there was an economic crash, which was really bad for Iceland. In 2009, like everything crashed down, we had hyperinflation and whatever. In 2010, the recovery started with the tourist boom. Remember that? the tourism boom starting. And so basically, the aircraft mechanics went on strike in a very inconvenient time, economically seen. And the arguments to basically put a law on the strike were purely that. They were purely like this would harm the economy of the whole Icelandic nation, which would in fact affect everyone in Iceland basically. And because the economic consequences of the strike might be too severe, we now put a law on it. I don't think they went to court over this. At this time in 2010, the heads of the unions were very business friendly. I will talk about this more next time when I talk about the light collective agreement, but they basically had the idea that the classes should collaborate with each other. And they were very much against the idea of being very aggressive. So they did not go to court over this. Even though in my absolutely I'm not a lawyer and I'm a complete layman opinion, but the way I understand the law, and there wasn't really a legal basis to put this law on a strike. I mean, the right to strike is, I think, even enshrined in the constitution in Iceland. It is. I mean, it is right. It's a right that you have as a worker. It's like the right to privacy. And it is very worrying that this kind of economic reasoning can be given to put a law on a strike. Because it basically means that now any strike that might be too effective, you can put a law on it. Unfortunately, Iceland doesn't really have predecessors so much. So I think if they try to do something similar again and the unions decide to go to court over it, they have a pretty good chance of winning. Because it's not in Iceland. It's not it has been done once and now legally it's allowed to do. Icelandic law doesn't really work that way. That is like an American way how like the law can work, but in Iceland that doesn't really work that way. But yeah, this was definitely a very worrying law that was made. What was also very interesting about this law is that it is very similar in wording to the teachers' law. So they basically just took the law from 2004, crossed out the word teachers, put in the word aircraft mechanics, and changed like a few other things, but it was very much the same. Then in 2015, the nurses went on strike. And again, the nurses were public employees, which meant that, again, it was the government on the other side of the table. And the government basically, they just didn't really want to negotiate with the nurses and put a law on it, which led a lot of nurses leaving the profession, and it very much crippled the healthcare sector. But like the government had been underfunding the healthcare sector for years by then. To talk a little bit about which governments were in control during the time, so in 2001, 2004, it was Sjálvstæðisflokkurinn, because it always is, and Framsókn now, of course. In 2010, it was actually the Social Democrats who were in power. I'm trying to be between two, like the government crashed and got reformed so much. I actually have to think about it, but no, 2010 was the Social Democrats. So, well, wer hat uns verraten, die Sozialdemokraten, I guess. And in 2015 it was, I think, Sjálvstæðisflokkurinn again. But it is basically like whichever government is in place, they do that. I mean, now we have like a leftist green government and they're thinking about putting a law on strike. So it doesn't really matter. Any government, whenever the strike becomes inconvenient, might consider this option. Yes, this is basically it. So legally, to summarize, legally, the way the law is written, it states that a profession which is important for the health and safety of the Icelandic nation, there might be a law put on them going on strike if it would endanger the health and safety of the Icelandic nation. That was very strangely worded by me now. But this law has kind of been extended, and the reasoning for this law has kind of been extended to a way that now any kind of damage that could be done to Iceland by a strike might be subjected to a law, which is just another way our right to strike is being attacked at the moment. And it's something to have in mind when we talk about the life quality of life collective agreement next time, how it's being evaluated, because it's going to be evaluated again next year. It was evaluated this year and then might be again next year, which then might lead to it being broken and strikes happening, or at least negotiations resuming, which then might lead to strikes. And even if it's not broken in, it is until 2020, so then negotiations start again. And so basically any future negotiations can be affected by this, the same way they can be affected by the Icelander case I talked about last time, where firings were used to undermine a strike. The government can also undermine a strike. We are heading into recession. The next negotiations are going to be much harder than the negotiations were last time. And it is just something to be aware of. Okay, that is it from me today. Again, I'm sorry if it was a bit rambly. I kind of just cobbled it together. I really hope the sound is okay now, so I don't have to re-record it because the light is going. I'm kind of using the last light of the day here to have a little bit of better quality. And yes, thanks for watching, and see you next time. And thank you to Friggy for really on short notice answering to a text, find everything about this, and well, being my Icelandic researcher. Your Googling powers are very appreciated.